From Gina Carano spreading transphobia to Colby Covington dropping a bunch of racist comments, here are UFC fighters whose mouths ruined their careers. Gina Carano didn't make her life any easier. She's known to be one of the pioneers of women's MMA. Even though Gina never got to fight in the UFC, she still managed to gain a ton of recognition, beating up every female MMA fighter in a 100-mile radius. After she lost to Chris Cyborg back in 2009, she practically gave up on MMA and moved on to better things. For her, this was pursuing a career in acting. For the most part, she had a pretty successful run. By the way, she's appeared in hit films like The Fast and the Furious 6, Deadpool, Haywire, and so many more. Her most famous appearance was when she joined the cast of The Mandalorian. Things seemed to be going great for her, though it didn't last very long. See, she ended up getting a bit too cocky and posted a few things on social media that didn't sit too well with everybody else. For starters, she started questioning whether Biden's presidential run was even legit. You can bet every Democrat in the country was after her head. She didn't wait too long before going off on social media again. Only this time, she decided to mess with the minority and started posting transphobic comments here and there. The girl even compared the Republicans to Holocaust victims. I don't know what she had going on in her head, but you can bet we won't be hearing from her anytime soon. Though things ended pretty badly for Carano, they were even worse for Tyler Manawaroa. Tyler was a part of the Australian MMA scene, and he was absolutely crushing it back in 2014. He managed to piece together a 10-0 win streak, and it didn't look like anyone could stand in his way to MMA stardom. Eventually, the UFC reared its head and spotted the young star. They ended up offering him a spot on their show, the Ultimate Fighter Nation's cast. Though he tried his best, Tyler didn't end up winning the show. Still, he showed enough promise to be offered a contract by the promotion. The guy probably thought this was his moment, and he was about to achieve what he'd always dreamed of. Oh, how wrong he was. See, back when he was just 17 years old, he made a pretty offensive Instagram post. He even dropped the N-word in the process. Somehow, the UFC didn't catch any of this during the background check. His castmate, Cajun Johnson, wasn't as sloppy. He ended up spreading the word to the UFC and then to fans of the sport. During those days, the UFC couldn't really afford to take any hits, so they decided to take a few drastic measures. They ended up cutting Tyler from the program and withdrawing his contract. Stuff must have hit him pretty hard, because he hasn't been spotted on the MMA scene since. Things ended similarly for this next fighter who ended up joking about a pretty sensitive topic. Of course, I'm talking about none other than Miguel Torres. Before everything, Torres was revered as a pretty dangerous bantamweight. Back in 2011, the UFC decided to buy out its sister promotion, the WEC. Now, Torres was one of the biggest fighters on the roster there. He was the bantamweight champion, and everybody expected big things from the champ. Though he lost the belt back in 2009, when the UFC bought out his promotion, success in the new promotion was sure to come. He was immediately offered a contract with the UFC, but his newfound success didn't last very long. Soon after he was signed, he made a pretty dumb mistake and ended up posting a pretty disturbing joke on social media without thinking about the consequences. Apparently, he quoted the show Workaholics, where they made a joke about assault. Fans of the sport didn't like this, and he was caught under fire almost immediately. As soon as Dana heard about what was happening, he called up Torres and kicked him out of the promotion, though he ended up re-signing him for the promotion just 2 weeks later. White's only explanation was that he apologized and owned up to his mistake. Re-signing him didn't last very long though, as he ended up getting let go once again just a year later, and like the other fighters on this list, hasn't been seen fighting since. This next fighter might be the only one who's still active. Fair enough though, because I'm talking about the notorious Conor McGregor. When it comes to McGregor, there's no shortage of controversies. This one in particular, well, it was against Khabib. We all know how tense their rivalry got, to the point where Conor even attacked Khabib's bus with a dolly. Anyway, Conor posted a few things on Instagram, which Khabib fans didn't appreciate. It's one thing to attack someone, but to go after their family, that's downright shameful. Then again, Conor's never been the type to follow the rules. Here he posted a picture of Khabib with his wife, then called Khabib's wife a towel. Even though he deleted the post moments later, it was up for long enough to get screenshotted and get spread around like crazy. MMA fans had him ducking social media for a while thanks to all the backlash he got. Khabib wasn't one to back down either, as he and his manager made a few posts that fired back at the Irishman. Eventually, Dana White himself got involved and issued an official statement. He talked about how the UFC was taking care of the incident internally, though everybody knows they didn't actually do anything. It didn't really matter in the long run though, because the Russian ended up getting his revenge in the octagon. He ended up completely mauling Conor. Now, Conor messing with Khabib's wife might look bad, but this next dude, he took things to a whole new level. The War Machine was an MMA fighter who fought under Bellator MMA. He wasn't the best person to be around, but he was a good fighter, which helped his case whenever he got into trouble with the promotion. Back in 2013, the War Machine made a pretty shitty post on Instagram, joking about assault. No one liked the post, and a lot of fans called him out for it. Then he went on to compare how men were treated to African American slaves back in early America and Jewish prisons under the Nazis. If he hadn't pissed enough people off already, well, there was a storm coming, and he wasn't about to get out of it scot-free. The Bellator CEO ended up standing by his fighter and issuing a statement. There, he talked about how War Machine would soon apologize and would learn from his mistakes. From what I can tell, the fighter didn't get the memo, because not too long after this incident, a sexual assault case came to light. At this point, no one could save him. He ended up getting fired from the promotion back in 2014. Fast forward a few years, and he ended up going to court for his crimes. Nowadays, he's serving a life sentence. Serves him right, I guess. Now, the next dude we're going to talk about is Colby Covington. Thankfully, he hasn't done anything as bad as the guy before, but he's not squeaky clean either. Covington is generally a pretty nice guy, though he's done a few questionable things in the past. The example we'll be talking about today happened back in 2020. But you know what they say, the internet never forgets. For some unknown reason, Colby decided to go after African-American fighters in the UFC. From what I can tell, his beef was mainly with Kamaru Usman, though he managed to drag in Tyrone Woodley as well. He made fun of Usman and his heritage by talking about his little tribe and how they probably still communicate with smoke signals. As if that wasn't bad enough, he went on to drag Woodley into the middle of things. For instance, he called Tyrone a Marxist and talked about how he supported criminals. He even said that Woodley was everything that was wrong with the country at the time. The guy didn't stop there either, as he went on to question whether the BLM movement even deserved all the attention it was getting. Eventually, things got so serious that Dana White had to weigh in with his opinion. Surprisingly, White went on to defend Colby and talked about how he's all about free speech. He mentioned how the UFC doesn't like to muzzle their fighters and that they're free to say whatever they want. He even talked about how nothing Covington said was actually racist and that he would be getting a free pass from all the controversy. I'm not gonna lie, nothing Covington said was even remotely okay. But if the boss doesn't think he's in the wrong, well, there's not much us normies can do about it, right? Thankfully, he hasn't caused as much of a stir since. Unlike everybody on this list, things actually seem to be looking up for him. Here's to hoping he continues to be a genuine dude. From Colby Covington dropping a bunch of racist comments to Gina Carano spreading transphobia, those were UFC fighters whose mouths ruined their careers.